With the verdict, we lost the battle, but the war is not over, and we intend to fight.
A small sampling of the media coverage following the not guilty verdict in the George Zimmerman trial. Rick, to you first. We heard the prosecutor, Angela Corey, say this was never about race. So why have the media made it about race?
Well, it's because it's their agenda. You know, much of the time, media bias isn't just about what's written, it's about what's not written. And here we saw this week the Huffington Post Live do an interview with Rachel Jeantel, where she admits that Trayvon threw the first punch. But then the Huffington Post doesn't do a story on it. It's a live video coverage, and in the follow-up written piece, they don't even mention it. So there's a lot of trying to push the real story aside.
We have network anchors talking about racism. Chris Matthews on MSNBC apologized for white people. Where's all this going?
Well, I mean, let's take another example. The most flagrant, to my mind, Nancy Grace gets up and uses two words, bleep, bleep, that you couldn't put on the air and I couldn't say on the air. We'd both be fired momentarily. And instead, she sails right on, having completely defamed Zimmerman. And
she claimed those words came out of his mouth.
Incorrectly. And,
right. And there's no evidence that they did.
No, I mean, look, it goes on and on. The Washington Post did a whole giant style section article on Trayvon Martin as another Emmett Till, a lynching victim. And it's the only problem is the media are failing to, as John Nolte of Breitbart pointed out, the media are failing to sell this to the country. The country thinks the verdict was correct, and the media still sail on anyway because they're pursuing an agenda.
Does it tarnish the memory of Emmett Till and Medgar Evers to make those comparisons?
Oh, I think the situation is very, very different, and it's a very different country. A lot has happened since then. But it's interesting to me that the president, in his statement about the Trayvon Martin tragedy, did not use the word race. It did not come into his discussion of this. He talked about gun violence. He talked about the stand your ground law in Florida. He did not talk about race.
He had Eric Holder do it for him.
Well,
stand your ground. Stand your ground.
And the Justice Department is still going after George Zimmerman, or potentially looking at the case as if they may intend to charge him under federal law.
Yeah, but I don't think there's anything unusual about that. After the riots the Rodney King riots, you'll remember that the first George Bush also they pursued federal federal action.
There is something unusual about it, though. If one crime, I mean, murders happen every day, and frankly, black on black crime is the far bigger problem.
Well, look, I think the fact that George Bush did it sort of demonstrates that it's not that unusual when there's a situation that has sort of captured the country's attention and that people feel that justice was not served. The verdict can be right and justice cannot be served. I think that that's what some people are missing, and I just don't see how bringing race up as an issue is, look, there are people who are race mongering, there's no question. I also don't think Nancy Grace is a great example of somebody who you look to for reasoned debate. There are people actually trying to have reasonable conversation about this.
Well, but Al Sharpton is pushing for the Justice Department to further charge Zimmerman. The Congressional Black Caucus wants the same.
Yeah. Well, they stir the pot. I mean, they have an interest in stirring the pot. But what I'm glad of is that there are now other African-American voices besides Jesse Jackson, besides Al Sharpton speaking up. Bill Cosby, who is a great icon in the African-American community for a whole bunch of reasons, said he didn't think race was the primary factor in this, or even a factor at all. And in fact, he said he stopped watching these high-profile cases since what's her name, the woman who was accused of killing her kid. Yeah, that's it, because he's just tired of them. But there's a double standard, John, when it comes to race. The Marietta Daily Journal in Georgia reported on 4 African-American gang members who attacked a white man coming out of a convenience store like Trayvon Martin, and he was forced to flee, and he fled into the street, and he was run over, hit by a car, and killed. There's been no national attention to that. That's a double standard.
There was Piers Morgan on CNN. He had Rachel Jeantel, Trayvon Martin's friend, on his program. The next day on CNN, she said that he was one smart cookie. So the conservative radio host, Larry Elder, reacted with this tweet. He said, Piers Morgan describes Rachel Jeantel as one smart cookie. Sure, it certainly explains why the 19-year-old is still in high school. Elder also accused Morgan of condescendingly trying to convince her that she is a victim. And when they got into it on Morgan's program, it was some pretty interesting television.
It was. I mean, again, as Cal said, there are voices out there, and let's hope that, look, the media are trying to drive an agenda. There's no question about that. Let's hope, though, that in their desire for conflict, they actually put on Jesse Jackson versus, say, Larry Elder and let them duke it out.
Too much racial hype, or is it appropriate?
Well, I think there was an excellent piece by Rich Lowry in Normally Writes for the National Review, but he had a piece in Politico where he said, okay, let's talk about race. Let's talk about black-on-black violence. Let's talk about the other issues that aren't being talked about because we're all enjoying this one so much. I really think there, as Kirsten said, is a place for calm, reasoned debate, and we are having some of it, but not enough of it in the media.
But I also want to say that if conservatives are so concerned about black-on-black crime, it's a little concerning. The only time I hear them talking about it is when they want to stick it to the black community, and that's what that seems like right now. That's the favorite topic A among conservatives is to talk about black-on-black crime. You know, well, black-on-black crime is a year-round problem, but now everyone's obsessing about it because they can push, you know, make
Kirsten,
black people feel bad about it.
Yeah, let me just jump in here for a second. You know, the day after when we had all the pro-Trayvon rallies here in Los Angeles, we had crime during and after the rally, and yet the Los Angeles Times didn't produce one single story covering that crime. There was no separate story on it. They ignored it. That fed to multiple days of crime.
The crime actually didn't happen at the rally.
No, it did. Actually, I watched it live.
The ones that went into the gas station?
No, there was I watched it for 15 minutes live on our CBS affiliate.
Okay, maybe
as
we're
the
talking about a
anchor
different
said,
incident,
everything was calm. No, it was the first night, and the media ignored it, and now we've had second, third, and fourth nights of crime in Hollywood.
What was
Assaults, jumping on cars, vandalism. One guy was belted in the face, a bystander. We had multiple, but you didn't hear about it because the Los Angeles Times, the paper of record, didn't write one single story on it.
The question is how much of this is being fomented by media coverage. Next.